And then, let's make sure that, you know what, well, you have to start the meeting, that's okay.
All right, shut this off now?
Yeah.
Some of them, replace,
Call to order, please. We'll all rise to the flag salute.
it's an updated one.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a reading of the Sunshine Law.
Notice of this meeting was published in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Okay. There will be no new business after 11 p.m. Before we do the roll call, I've done this on other meetings. If you're comfortable taking the masks off, we can. We're observing social distancing. I am assuming the folks that are sitting next to each other are the same family members, so if you want to do it, just take them off and we can all be a little more comfortable. Okay, we have a roll call, please.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Here.
Ms. Snyder? Absent. Mrs. Kelly? Here. Mr. McKay?
Here.
Mr. Wagner?
Here.
Mrs. Baggio?
Here.
Mrs. Tyndall?
Here.
Ms. Costco? Here. Mr. Levinson? Absent. Mr. Silk?
Here.
Mr. Tucci? Absent. And Mr. Krollpfeifer?
Here. Do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay. Items for new business. Hi there. We have several cases. The first one, I just want to mention one thing to the board members because we had a last-minute reversal of some things. As part of your information that you have for Mr. Perota, where's Mr. Perota? Am I pronouncing your name right? Parada, okay. Take a look in your correspondence. There's some information in there relative to this application, just in case we have any questions. Okay, Mr. Parada, you want to step forward, please, and have to state your name and address and face our counselor over there to your left and be sworn in.
Jason Parada, 9 Chaucer Circle.
Sir, raise your right hand, please. Swear the testimony you give will be truthful, and the truth, so help you. Thank you.
Okay, how may we help you?
Good evening, board members. I'm here to apply for bulk variance for the installation of a new swimming pool at our property. We just had some setback requirements, and basically, it was a water, it was the, what is it, the ground cover.
Impervious?
Impervious ground cover, yes.
Uh-huh.
So we're just seeking for approval for that this evening.
Okay.
We've met the criteria so far up to this point as far as doing our mailings, our publication in the newspaper, and so forth. So we're just here for your...
Okay. And do we all get invited to the pool opening?
Absolutely.
Okay, just kidding. Does any board members have any questions of Mr. Perota?
Now, where is this house?
We are located on Chaucer Circle, so we're the first court as you come into the development. We're the first left and second, first court basically in the development.
Yeah, off, when you turn off,
Bancroft to Lennox, we're the first court on the left-hand side.
All right.
and you have an irregular shaped lot.
Yes. Yeah, we're in the...
I mean, I have to say it because we have to say it. I was at the property looking at it, and
Okay.
I knew you weren't putting the pool on as you face the house, the right side, but it's going way in the back on the left.
That's correct.
And I think the only variance you have is you're asking for 10 feet instead of 15 on the side.
Yes.
Okay. Any comments from professionals?
No.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, okay, thank you. He did mention that before. Okay, any comments or questions from the board members? Hearing none, I'll ask for public comment. Anyone on the public wish to speak? Okay, having said that, what's the board's pleasure? Approve the application as submitted with the variances? Or we have...
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the application.
I'll second.
Okay, and that's with the 10-foot setback and the impervious up to 33 something, 35.3. Okay.
And we have no neighbors were notified and nobody's come out, correct?
Not that I'm aware of. All neighbors have been notified.
Okay.
The list we were provided, 200 feet. I haven't heard any
Okay,
Okay.
well, motion stands.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mayor McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Ms. Casco,
Yes.
Mr. Silk,
Yes.
and Mr. Krollpfeifer.
Yes, you're approved. Do you need anything else from us?
No,
I-
wait, Paula, you didn't say my name.
I'm sorry.
I say I seconded it.
You seconded it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ms. Kendall.
So yes.
Thank you for approving that. I also would like to ask for possibly a waiver for harmless agreement to proceed with a permit prior to the resolution being
Okay.
memorialized.
How about if we do it without possibly in there?
Yes.
Better yet?
I would
Okay.
request
Do we have a motion and a second to waive the resolution?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall,
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Ms. Casco,
Yes.
Mr. Silk,
Yes.
and Mr. Krollpfeifer.
Yes,
Okay.
all done.
Thank
Just
you.
give me 1 second. Bob, can you re-educate me on the perils of doing this?
Oh, yeah.
Are if he proceeds at his own risk during the appeal period. So in other words, at the next month's meeting, the resolution will be adopted. If somebody wants to appeal that decision, they can do so within 45 days. If you proceed, you're proceeding at your own risk as to whether or not somebody will appeal.
Okay.
That's your
Understood.
decision.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, sir? Just wanted you to know that,
I appreciate that.
all right?
Thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor McLaughlin. The next case is Robert Shin for the variance for the apartment. Mr. Shin here?
Postpone.
Oh, thank you. Okay. We'll postpone that. We need a motion to postpone though, right?
No,
No. Got it.
you
Okay.
have to do notice.
We're not, okay. All right. Case 1804 Revicchio. Who will be speaking on behalf of Mr. Revicchio?
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Could I just make I just want all the board members to know what transpired since the last meeting and in between. With Mr. McLaughlin's suggestion and my assistance, we had a meeting of the Economic Development Committee wherein members of the township, Mr. Revicchio's people, and help me with it's Mr. Muschlegel, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
He was there and his attorney. And you had 3 people from the Joint Land Use Board there, Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Silk, and I were there. And we also had some help from our attorneys, and Leila Gilmore was there, and Paula Costco, and Scott Taylor, our planner. So I just want the board members to know, because there was a big question that was raised by me at the last one as to why we didn't know about this in advance. So we did get involved in it there, and I'll now turn it over to you, sir.
Sure, and I'll just explain. I'm Doug Heinold. I represent Longbridge Farm LLC, and that is essentially Mr. Revicchio and Drew Crisanda, who have been involved in this application process for a number of years on this piece of property. Actually, Mr. Revicchio lives on a portion of the property in question. Just to expand on that a little bit more, we did meet for a couple of hours talking about Muschlegel, but also our property, the redevelopment process overall, and the request that came out of that was that we come forward tonight with an informal presentation about where our head is at, I guess is the best way to put it, right?
Correct.
And I want to emphasize, it's just where our head is at. It's conceptual at this point. We have spent money understanding the site, meaning there's engineering work that has gone in to know where the wetlands are, to know what the site limitations are in terms of where development layout can occur. And there's also been a substantial amount of time spent interacting with the municipality in terms of getting feedback on what setbacks are going to be required, connections that would be appreciated or frowned upon, and things like that. So that has all gone into what has brought us here tonight, and we're just going to try and do a very simple overview of. Okay. Do you want to, or do you want to just come up and tell us the plan, Doug? This is Doug Zabo from JSA Engineering, who was also at the informal meeting that we had and is here tonight to address any issues or questions. But the plan that you see over here is sort of a color-coded copy of what we have last presented. And the top of that piece of property is the Route 38 corridor. The yellow or beige section is the commercial portion of what we're proposing. That large blue center is wetlands limitations. So it kind of becomes a little bit of an island bisecting the site. And then that back portion is the green section, light green section, which leads out to Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, where we're proposing residential. That would be single family across the frontage, and then townhouses tucked in behind it. Again, all very conceptual at this point. This is what we think is sort of a logical layout of the site to provide and achieve the goals of the master plan, in that we want to take advantage, obviously, of potential development and ratables for commercial endeavors along the Route 38 corridor, but also be sensitive to how that then backs up and interfaces to what's behind it in the residential areas. So we think there's a good transition with this plan in terms of commercial up front, moving to townhouse development to single family and out to Hainesport.
Excuse me, sir, could you please use the microphone? I can't hear what you're saying.
Sure, I'll do the best I can. The site is two things about connections that were talked about with the township that I think are pretty well established is we would have an interconnection with the Muschlegel tract, which is the other developer. If you're looking at this, it would be to the right of the color-coded area where the old, what I call the old Volkswagen site sits. And that would have some sort of interconnection between what we anticipate will all be Route 38 commercial development along the frontage there. What will not be connected is the residential section to the commercial. There will be no way to get from Route 38 commercial to the residential section out to Hainesport.
Can you just get closer to the microphone, please?
Sure.
He said that there will be no connection between the proposed residential area and the yellow highway commercial. Okay, highway commercial will be accessible from 38, and the residential property area will be accessed from Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. That's the proposed. Is that right?
So this is, right, and this is where we are in this process as we see the best opportunity for development to actually occur.
Can you, she'll give you a spot.
Just for you.
While we're getting the audio hooked up, sir, gentleman in the back, if you would like, if you want to come up and look at the map closer, don't strain. I saw you trying to lean forward and see what, are you okay with it though? Yeah, you're okay to, okay. All right, you're okay to go up there and look at it. Thank you. And we have, there's another piece in the back on the table that has the, I guess I'll call it the previous proposal or something.
Well, that's actually the overall redevelopment.
Overall redevelopment.
Ours is just a portion of
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but I could see people struggling trying to understand what you're into when we want to make it clear. Okay, sir.
So the other point I wanted to make is what this is not. We don't have any contracts with any developer at this point. we don't think we will until we actually have the ability to say the zoning's in place, the redevelopment plan's in place. So this is really just a concept at this point and not anything more than that. Again, we're not asking for any determination from the board tonight. This is purely informational purposes for what we think the future of the site could be. And when we get, again, when we reach the redevelopment designation section, we'll probably speak again at that point relative to the actual development process.
Okay.
I don't know, that's really just what we wanted to share. I don't know if there's any questions or comments that the board members have, but we just wanted to give a general sketch of the area.
Okay. If I may interject something for the benefit of the board members right now. When we were at this economic development meeting, there were several attorneys there. Mr. Heinold was one. And we were told that this is all very, very preliminary in terms of qualifying for the non-condemnation, emphasis on that for the residents in the area. It's non-condemnation, redevelopment, what's the other R word?
Rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation. And they will have to come back in eventually, not only to the town, to the Joint Land Use Board, but the township, after the township puts out certain preliminary guidelines for things that can't go on there. And we did banty some of the things around at the meeting, like there's not going to be any gas stations, there's going to be any mechanical, automotive body shops or anything along those lines. There was some talk about an upscale restaurant possibility. Everything is a possibility. Nothing is, all plans are planted firmly in midair. Would that be fair? So all we're being asked to do tonight is recommend approval of the redevelopment and turn it back to the township committee, and then they pass out the rules for what cannot go there and so forth.
Right, I agree, and I'll defer to your professionals on that. As to this section, again, we were asked to present a sketch of our thoughts. That's a sketch of our thoughts, and unless there's any questions on that, we'll defer to the next.
All right, any board members have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Okay, Mr. McKay.
What communications with the Molschlegel group have you had?
Eric, do you want to speak to that at all? I mean, we're in communication, but we're not a partner of theirs. But Eric can speak to it.
Yeah, and again, for the board members, Mr. Frank, who's the attorney for Molschlegel, he said he was going to be here tonight to make a presentation, so. Mr. Ruvicchio, you have to be sworn in.
And if I just can, Mr. Chairman, Mr. McKay, one of the things as we started this process, the town has felt very strongly, even dating back to the original 2004 and 2007 plans for those two properties, insisted that there be an interconnection between those properties, because what we want to try to eliminate is having multiple unnecessary driveways out onto Route 38. That if somebody's on one of these sites, they can access the other site along that corridor without having to go out, or worse, having to go out, do a jug handle, get back on one of the county roads, come back around. So that's been something that the town they are not partners in this. In a way, we're all partners together, but the town has been pretty insistent that there be that vehicular and pedestrian interconnection between those properties.
Yeah, I mean, these sites are so linked that without sort of a coordinated development between the two of them, you could wind up with a messy site that doesn't work very well.
Agreed.
So that's obvious to everybody, I think, correct?
Eric,
Yes, Mr.
He doesn't
Ruvicchio,
need to be sworn in. It's not he does not need to be sworn
He was
in
the last time.
until it becomes a formal application.
Okay.
So, Mr. Ruvicchio, we all know the necessity of trying to work these two sites together for development. What can you tell us of the efforts to deal with the Molschlegel people?
So the conversations have just been open dialogue as far as developing a plan together. You can see we have our plan here. I don't know if they're coming or they're attending remotely, but they also submitted
a plan with the informal review that was basically separate. The only thing that would be possible is that the two sites would be linked together via cross easement for access, as Scott had mentioned. As far as the users, I don't know where they stand with the development of their property. We are fairly far along in the process of the engineering, so we would like to continue that on our basis, and if the opportunity presents itself, the crossover, we will address it at that time. But our communication line with them is open.
Have they expressed a position with regard to the interconnection of the two sites by roads and easement interconnections?
They were also amicable to the access.
Okay.
May I just interject one thing from the benefit of the public, because some people picked up this map, and the map that was in the back, or it's not a map, but what's it called? A design plan.
It's a recommendation
Okay.
map as part of their designation.
The properties that they were just referring to is B, C, I, H, O, P, and J on the map. That's the Muschlegel property that Mr. Rusvicchio was responding to Mr. McKay's question, correct? Okay.
So my next question concerns the tax abatement issue that could be had potentially for this development arrangement. And I don't know who is best to answer this, Mr. Rusvicchio or your counsel, but what's your position on the application of the tax abatement provisions to the residential development portion of this site?
I don't think that's even on the table, and we're not asking that it be.
Okay. Only for the commercial site?
Yes,
So the yellow?
yes. And again, that would be subject to negotiation at the time that somebody's actually ready to come in and redevelop on the commercial section.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Not on this chart that we have up as a present exhibit, but on the chart that the chairman just referred to, which was a handout that many of us, well, everybody on the board has, and probably most of the people in the audience should have. We have the pink lots, the so-called pink lots, which are the developed single-family houses, which technically might qualify under either of the two redevelopment provisions, principally because they happen to be older housing and not for any other reason. Does your group, Riccio Group, have any position on how the town, in your view, ought to treat the pink lots?
So I think that's an excellent question, and I think I want to be careful about making sure that we deal with that in the redevelopment designation portion of tonight and not our conceptual discussion, which, again, I'd like to try and wrap up if we can to move on to the next stage. But as a preview, we take no position on that. We think the town should do whatever it thinks is appropriate relative to that. We're not advocating that those sites be designated. That's up to the town and its process. We have no interest. And I would also say that our plan actually, I think, honors the residential by putting residential for single family up along that section of the Eastport Mountain Hall Road.
Yes, I can see that, yes.
And just to clarify, your proposal and the plan that you're showing informally doesn't include any of those pink single-family residential properties?
Nothing on our property is included in our plan, and those are not our properties, only what we have ownership and control over.
All right. Just sort of my last question. I think it's probably obvious from the plan you have up, but let me ask it anyway to make sure it's on the record. Is your present thinking, or the Rusvicchio's present thinking, that this site would be developed as an integrated site, that is, all at one point in time, as opposed to piecemeal?
I think, I don't know if Eric wants to respond to that in more detail. I think ideally, we'd love for everything to move forward, because that would suggest that we have fish on all hooks and we're able to move forward in that regard. But I don't know that the market will bear that out, and until we get to that point, we won't know.
So that then leads me to the sort of the follow-up potential question. if you don't know, are you proposing a concept plan that, for the overall development of the site, that could be built out as opportunities arose, as opposed to a patchwork, I'll call it, for lack of a better phrase, of doing the jug handle corner for 200 feet, and then something else comes along 3 years later for the next 200 feet, and, you know, they clash.
So my goal as the attorney, in order to get vested rights, would be to come in on a preliminary application that would cover the entire site. Obviously, as users come in, especially on the commercial front, they always need modifications. So we can say, we think we'd like to try and attract a restaurant of X thousand square feet, and when they come, it's X 1,200 square feet, and that's what they're calling for, and we got to come back in and amend and get final. But as a goal, I think that the idea would be to try and get a preliminary approval on the entire site, because that then vests us in that site, and we can go out and market the site better, and we get protections from any changes that might come down the pike.
Yeah, and are you, let me just get mine done out of the way. Are you seeking any relief from any of the design parameters that we have for the Route 38 corridor, principally for our discussion today, the setbacks, frontage setbacks?
So tonight, no, and that discussion, I think, would be subject to whatever is presented down the line. But if that's all in the control of municipality, if the municipality wants to hold the line on setbacks, then that's going to be the parameters that we have to work under the redevelopment plan, and I'll defer to Scott or anybody else who wants to address that further. But as we stand here tonight, we're not asking for anything in terms of relief. We're just presenting our idea as requested.
Okay.
And
That's it.
If I can just sort of as a follow-up, just make these comments.
Can we have, Ms. Baggio would like to have a question?
I just wanted some clarification. You're talking about your site, and I know that you have that map there, but we're looking at this area, study boundary. You're talking about what on our site map is called Site A and Q. And D. That
And
little
D.
piece of D. Okay. A, Q, and D is all you're talking about.
Right.
That's all you're speaking to.
That's exactly right.
Okay, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, that's the yellow portion of,
Well, it's yellow on that one, but that's different to this.
right. But on the portion that they have, the green encompasses, their green on their chart up on the board today encompasses the area known as D in the previous diagram
Right.
that identified the lots.
Right, but it does not include B, C, H, I, P, and O, and J.
No.
Right, exactly.
This is A, that is
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, so we understand.
And we know somewhere down the road, if you proceed with this, you're going to have to request zoning to change highway commercial to residential for the part that you've added.
There is a portion here,
Yeah.
essentially from here to here.
Right.
That we're talking would be residential, but currently it's highway commercial. And one of the reasons for that is sightline visibility on Route 38. This is wetland which we cannot touch from a commercial standpoint. It's not.
Okay, thank you.
So our planner was going to add something to my last question.
Just as a follow-up, a lot of times with redevelopment projects like this, where there may be multiple sites, it's not uncommon for there to be a phasing plan and for there to be a master plan along with design standards, because I think everyone's told, and I don't want to speak for the board yet, but what we don't want to see is this patchwork of inconsistent pieces of architecture, roadways that don't align properly, different lighting fixtures. So when we get, and if we get to a redevelopment plan phase, those things would be considered so that hopefully a build out, and again, it would be ideal for everything to be built at once along that corridor. That's not always market reality, but we want to make sure that as it does get phased in, there is visual consistency, functional consistency, and connectivity between the portions of their site and to the Mushlightle site, so it's sort of a unified development at its completion.
I think that's very important. Otherwise, the potential is that it looks like Route 38 as you drive through Maple Shade. Need I say more?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Let me hold it up for a minute.
Any other questions or comments from the board members?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Number one, just in moving forward in your site, I agree that you should not have cars or vehicles between the green and the yellow. But have you ever thought about having some type of a pedestrian so people that are living there can walk to the restaurants or to something, you know?
Yeah, obviously that's something that's beneficial to the site and it's beneficial to the residents 100%.
Okay. Right now, the other thing is the wetlands. Does the diagram that you're showing there, does that include the wetland buffers?
That is correct.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
So,
Mr. McLaughlin.
I appreciate the presentation, I appreciate the meeting. I understand that there is a process to this that we kind of interrupted because I don't recall during my tenure that we necessarily deemed an area in need of redevelopment when there was in fact an inkling of what kind of development might wind up there. And I realize there's, from what we understand, you're not letting us know that there's any potential customers for the commercial side. The residential side is what it is. I appreciate Eric coming and giving us that information, and that just helps get the board, behind or at least an understanding of what you're trying to do there. So I appreciate you coming in, and I'm sorry to disrupt the process, but, we need to understand for ourselves what we're doing here. So, you helped us do that, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Before I turn over to public comment, I just want the public mainly to know that the young lady that came in over here is our deputy mayor, Lee Schneider, who's a member of the Joint Land Use Board, and also former Mayor Mick Dickinson is in the back. He came in to keep an eye on us. And so, dare I ask, any questions from the public? Yes, sir. You want to step forward, please? Yes, you have to go to the microphone. State your name, address, and face our counsel, and he'll swear you in.
Sure. Hi, I swear in public. My name's Larry Bailey, live on 720 Mount Laurel Road. We bought the Kane property on the corner there of Belchertown and Mount Laurel Road. So...
You have to be, does it have to be sworn? Oh, not for an informal? I'm sorry, okay.
So, my question's really, I hear a lot of talk about the development plans, which obviously take a lot of money and energy, and I'm brand new to this township, only about a year and a half, but I came from Medford Township for about 18 years, and my anxiety with this kind of a project isn't necessarily how this gets done, it's the impact of the overall township, quality of life, educational platforms that we have, health and human services, things like that. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on those costs and those plans as we go through the heavy work of trying to configure residential housing and commercial. And concerns me a lot, especially this day and age with regards to tax base, if we are even going to consider tax abatement for any of these projects at this point, as the taxpayers bear the brunt of the aftermath of things like this if not planned accordingly.
So I have a comment, because we did reach out to our school superintendent, because we have a lot of development going on right now, and it's really unprecedented development in Hainesport. And our school is in need of students. He wants 100, 150 more kids. So we're concerned about bringing in all this residential, and then, you, me, and everybody in this room having to foot a new school. So I think, from what Mr. Korn says, we're okay with everything that's kind of on the table. We did talk to him. And I can just make a comment that I don't think the township has ever granted any sort of tax abatement for residential property. Commercial, absolutely. We need to see what we need to do to help some of these businesses get in and reduce the impact of their costs, but it has to be a good business for the community. So I don't think there's any, other than living on the corner. I live not far away. There's some people that live right there in the room. I don't really see personally any terrible tax type impact from something like this.
I would just like to make sure that the public has an opportunity to actually have an observation of this analysis and that work to be done.
Yeah, so, Scott was very good to give us all a cheat sheet, and those phases are down here in the green when the developments start. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for the public to look at whatever they get, when they get a customer. I don't know if they have customers yet for that site, other than possibly the residential.
So just to be clear from what you're saying, Mayor, it sounds like a lot of good thought and planning has gone into that the families that come into this development, as well as other developments that are currently underway in Hainesport Township, will not affect the need to build more classrooms or more school?
Not according to the superintendent, but that's his business. We let him run his side of the business, and we did ask him because we were a little nervous. We have, if you look around, there's a lot of digging going on right now in Hainesport. So we that's what he says, and I believe him. He knows what he's doing.
Thank you, Mayor.
Just to give you, I'm a parent and I have kids at Hainesport, so I've been in the township for 11 years. The school is down about 120 kids from when we first moved in, if that gives you any idea. The neighborhood that I'm in, we used to have one bus for our whole neighborhood, and now it goes to 4 different neighborhoods because everyone keeps aging out of Hainesport School. So there's definitely, the school has had a lot more kids than what it has now. So it should be okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, wait, just 1 second. I want to ask Mr. Taylor a question that may help you a little bit. I'm going to go out on a limb and speculate on something. Would it be safe to say that the public will have probably at least 4 more opportunities to express a point of view, maybe 2 before the Township Committee and 2 before Joint Land Use Board, before it's a final digging holes and...
At least, and I left the extra copies of that one-page cheat sheet on the back there, but it is a 10-step process, and there are multiple public hearings during each one of those 3 phases.
Okay.
This is that first phase, where we just talked about the designation. The next phase is redevelopment, where we actually talk about what happens on the properties, and then after that, it still comes back to full planning board review and approval, Joint Land Use Board review and approval. So if you want to grab one of those color copies, that sort of sets up all the different opportunities.
That would be this...
for public input.
This one. And Scott, Matt, generally, I know that it varies, but what kind of potential time span does this process possibly entail?
So that really is, the planning process itself could be done within a matter of months, by the end of the year or wrap up early next year very easily. The next part is really market dependent, and that's where, depending on those uses that we're trying to get in there, and if there is a market for the residential in 2021, if there's a market for a restaurant or whatever any of those other uses are. As the board may remember, it was less than a year ago that we were in for a redevelopment designation and a redevelopment plan on the Stevens property for the Lawrence Boulevard redevelopment area. And that Hainesport Commerce Center has just broken ground on their construction. So that process moved along quickly because they knew there was demand. With retail and office, it really is market dependent, and we're in, I think it's an understatement to say we're in sort of uncertain times right now. So when it actually gets implemented is a much larger question.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Any other public comment? Mrs. Betcher?
I'm going to use this so you can all hear me.
My first concern is if the both properties were combined. Well, from what I could hear, I would say yes. Is this true?
No, they're not combined.
They're not combined, they're talking together to work together, but not combining the property, am I right?
Oh, for a road.
Yeah, they got, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Rivicki.
Are you referring to our sections of our development?
I think
Or are you referring to Mush-Lego and our?
Mrs. Betcher is referring to both properties, right? Mush
Yes, I
Lake-
don't know if they're going to combine them, or,
Okay,
I couldn't hear anybody
Okay, I
speak
think-
because I don't speak in the phone right.
all right, Mr. Heinold said that they're going to have a road that will go across from the Revicchio Highway Commercial to the Muschlegel property, but there's not going to be a combination
Oh,
of
okay.
anything from illegal. They're not joining it together. They're going to work together to try to develop that whole highway commercial section,
Okay.
which would be the yellow part that's on that map, plus the ones that I indicated before on the other map, okay?
Okay,
Just a follow-up to that, he very clearly said that there would be no connection to Route 38 and the commercial down onto Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. So only the residential would come out onto Hainesport Mount Laurel Road.
okay, and speaking of the residential, I am totally against these 3- and 4-story high things, whatever you call them. Number one, I don't think our fire department is equipped to fight anything that's more than 2 stories high. I might be wrong, but. I'm Alma Betcher. I live at 520 Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, which is in that pink. My property before August 4th, 1971, was a part of now called JATP, LLC. My actual line runs further back than the JATPC LLC, on the curve and the 25-foot by my garage. In 1970, when this property was cut out from the rest of Bud Bachman's property, the board did not cut the lot out very well. Years later, I asked Bud Bachman if he would square the lot, and his answer to me was no. My main concerns, a deep decline in property value and harder to sell from a selling point of view, and they are my views. Lighting, I am arrogant to. Amount of lighting on entire property includes wattage, spotlights. I cannot have any orange lights. There is a resolution in the township right now for a place near my home for a reason. Number 50, 1986 F, as in Frank. Is crucial, the lighting. 49 years ago, there was a dairy farm across Mount Laurel Road with nothing. Now, nothing but people who light it up. It's called light pollution. The New Jersey League of Municipalities had an article in their magazine about how this light pollution affects us. There's a very large stormwater pipe and easement on the property from Hainesport Mount Laurel Road to Mr. Revicchio's property and empties into a ditch between properties and goes under Route 38 to Mason's Creek, to my knowledge. What becomes of it? It is on Ray Tucci's property. It is sinking, and Ray told me the county will not address it. Drainage is for Laurel Ridge and Hainesport Chase under Mount Laurel Road back to Mr. Revicchio's property.
Could I just for the benefit of everybody else, Ray Tucci's property is one of the 5 pink ones that are listed on the other map, right?
Yes, he's the end one, closer to 38. And if you notice, he has a fence, and the people next door to me put up a white vinyl fence, and there's a space in between. And he left that because this pipe is broke or whatever, it's sinking. He's gone after the county, I don't know how many times. and they just refused to do anything. My husband told him put concrete in it, they'd find soon that they would be backed up and fix it. But that's my own comment. He did not put his fence there because if equipment has to come in to fix it, he didn't want them tearing down his fence to do that. That's why there's a space, but he owns the property. I'm hoping that behind me that it stays flat, and what I mean by that is no berm across all the properties affected. It's a natural downhill drainage from all existing properties along Mount Laurel Road in that area. An illegal berm exists on one property, which was reported to the township, but they never looked at it or anything was done about it. It's still there. An upscale restaurant that we already have on 38 cannot keep ownership. A buffer zone, how many feet? Certain trees in my estimation are garbage trees. Leaves, pine cones, and needles have been a big problem to me as the wind blows from the north, and I get all the leaves on my property from the backwoods. Pine, oak, maple are not in my likable category. And also, how close to my property line will any buffered trees or anything else be planted? A small portion of the ground was in the floodplain by me, but it was filled in illegally. The township did nothing when it was reported to them. When Jamie, who used to either own it or whatever he did, he had sheds. Everything they dug from any property, put the shed on it, was dumped behind me, including a high chair and many more things. It's impossible to anticipate and address everything until a problem arises once built. What recourse do I have to address a problem that may be solvable, later as opposed to now? Thank you.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Mrs. Betcher. Item number 6, an upscale restaurant that we already have on Route 38. I saw a couple people looking, saying, what are you talking about there?
I don't know the name of it. It's an Italian restaurant in there by Molly Maid.
Oh, it used to be La Tavola, and it's Perino?
I don't know. I've only eaten there once or twice, and unless, we go there for...
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mrs. Betcher, just one question.
Sure.
What is your position on whether your two properties, which are K and L, in the group of pink properties, should be considered to be within the development area or left as is for zoning purposes?
I didn't get the last part of what you said. I'm sorry, because of the mask. I try to read lips too, and I'm sorry.
What is your position as to whether your two properties, your two lots, K and L, in the pink zone, should be left undesignated for purposes of zoning, left the way they are, or designated in the rehabilitation area?
K and L?
Your lots. Your lots.
Pardon?
Your lots.
My lot is one lot.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
With regard to that lot, are you in favor of leaving your lot undesignated, or would you like to have your lot included in the rehabilitation area?
I'm not sure I understand that, and I don't want to answer either way until I had someone explain it a little better. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Yes, ma'am. Hold a second. Go ahead, come on.
Hi, Patty Burns, 2515 Fostertown. I just have a question. Actually, Elma made it pop in my head. Between my property and next door to me, there's an underground creek. we bought that property at 75. There's a little surface, then it goes under. Sometimes it'll surface again, and it goes under. But it goes under in a pipe across Fostertown Road to a county pipe that goes down to Parker's Creek. How's that going to be affected? It goes all the way back by the wetlands.
It goes all the way back to
I'm
where?
wondering every time you change and move dirt around and everything else with water, somewhere you can always divert it, but you can't stop it. It makes its way somehow or another back in my basement.
Yeah, did I understand you said that the pipe goes all the way back to the
No.
the wetlands area here, or is it something I'm
No,
missing?
No, not a pipe. It's like an underground creek that has been there forever. And it goes, that comes out, it surfaces at Fostertown Road, and then the county came along about 20 years ago and decided to put this pipe in, and it made it worse. So now they have all kinds of problems that they're always between the two properties on the other side of Fostertown Road, trying to fix this water backing up. I'm just wondering, just shifting around of all this dirt, movement and all that, what the heck is that going to do? We already have a flooding problem since we're lower than...
Okay, I think Mr. Taylor might be able to comment on that.
Just, whenever development comes in and they come before the planning board and the joint land use board, they also have to get approvals from the state. They also have to design their stormwater management system to meet the DEP stormwater management regulations. So they will have to address, that's why you see these enormous drainage basins, these detention basins on site.
I'm not sure they even know that exist, to tell you the truth.
So they may not, but one of the regulations basically says that after the development, they can't change how much water is leaving their site after development than what existed in the existing condition. So they can't dump more water in any direction onto any other properties. They have to direct that through swales and pipes to meet the New Jersey stormwater management regulations. That's something that gets reviewed by the township and the joint land use board engineer, and also by the folks at soil erosion to make sure that any of those existing conditions aren't exacerbated as a result of development.
But I think what you're,
75 to at least 80, we had swales. Every one of those properties had swales all the way around.
well, ma'am, you're talking about water that, it sounds like you're speaking about water that enters the site. Is that what you're speaking about?
And I'd have to draw it out. It's like this little underground creek, right, that works its way from the wetlands, that weren't wetlands for a long time. It works its way, and it goes under Fostertown Road. What the county did a few years, 20-some years ago, back, they dug up the old wooden bridge, and they put it in the pattern over this other bridge, and they put a big, what do you want to call that?
Culvert, a pipe?
Yeah, going under the road, and that goes down between the Moore's property, Clark's property, between there and next door, and goes all the way out past, like a plateau back in there, goes all the way out that way to Clark's Creek.
No, I think it's actually going to Mason's Creek.
That makes it
And it's going, and you're correct, there's a lot of small, that even date back to near where the jug handle is too, that have been there for years. Sometimes on maps, they're designated as runs, but the runs are usually open, totally open. So I don't know, I haven't seen any mapping on that area, but it is true that there's a lot of underground streams. I live on Lumberton Road. I live about a quarter of a mile back from Route 38. But when they widened 38, they told us that the underground streams would shift. I've been there almost 45 years, and they've shifted 3 times. So you are going to have underground streams in the area. They've shifted.
75, so.
They'll shift, and they may shift again. They do shift usually with development, but they also shift with storms, and they also seem to shift on their own.
You know what my dad always said when we bought that property? You can divert water, but you can never, he was an old farmer. Get it to never stay. It'll always come back. Water seeks its own, it goes back to where it belongs. So.
Well, that's good information.
It scares me, you know?
Yeah, that's good information. I'm sure Scott's taking notes, and we appreciate you letting us know that. And maybe Eric knows about it, maybe he doesn't, I don't know.
I'm not even sure the county realizes it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Could you just tell us your name and where you live in?
Pat Mackin, 116 Mason Woods Lane. I just have a question. Nowhere on the site do I see low, moderate income. Why is that when there's all kinds of not discussions from you guys, well, there's been some, about what's going on Creek Road, 72 units? Why isn't some of it being diverted over here and spread it around instead of dumping 72 units on our street in the middle of a residential area? So there's, rightly so, concern for the residents that live on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. Why are we not seeing that on Creek Road? So why is there no low income here?
I think...
So, if you don't mind, H?
No, I was just going to say, I think let's confine the question to
That's
this
what I'm
property.
concerned
I
about.
can't address
I
the
mean,
other thing.
Pat, I can comment. Two different projects. The other developer had come in, and that's what he does. That's what he wants to build. I don't think that's what Eric's property is designed for. So he's the property owner. These people have a right to buy and sell property and develop it sort of the way they want. Now we're getting into the affordable housing needs that the township has to meet. But I don't think Eric's proposing affordable housing here. Is that correct, Eric?
Well, we are bound by law to have a public requirement.
So the township will extract something from us, either units or money. And that's what
So by law,
an obligation.
yeah, by law, they have an obligation to provide either 20% of the project or monetary arrangements to the town's affordable housing project. But it's really up to they have a right to develop the property the way, they have a right to develop that property. That's just, where we're at on it. But I don't think they're proposing. I don't necessarily know, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if we have, our solicitors we could make them put it there. I don't think we can do that. I don't think we're able to do that.
Bruce, here's my thing. We're supposedly 100% buildable town for low and moderate income. It should be spread out throughout the town. Obviously, out on the highway, now you're going to have stores there or a restaurant. That's accessible. All these projects going in, all of this low income, moderate income, should be spread within the township, not centered. So I'm asking, why aren't all these developers, like behind Gus's Diner, now you have the Revicchio project, you have what's going in on Marne and the bypass, why isn't it all being spread around?
That's a good question.
And it should be. I would like the board to consider that.
It's a good question.
Help us out.
I don't know if that's not, we're not really in that phase right now in what he's doing, what he's trying to do. We stopped it because we just wanted to get an understanding of, what they were trying to do, what they had an idea to do there. So they've come in and graciously put up with us to come in and explain what they're trying to do. But I don't know if the town can make them put it, there is a 20%, Paul, you're the expert here on affordable housing.
I'm not an expert, I'm learning still as well.
You're the expert here.
It's 15%.
15?
If they were to build.
I'm just saying, consider
contribution.
what might be dumped behind us, and let's give it equal to the rest of the town.
I got you.
That's all.
I got you.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack.
15%.
Any other public comment?
20.
Seeing no hands, I'll close public comment. Oh, sorry.
There's anybody online.
Oh, sorry.
Can we unmute?
I think both of the ladies who spoke, your questions are all excellent, but I think maybe if I say premature might be a little bit, we've got a long way to go with all of this stuff before we get to addressing these specifics.
Okay, we do have somebody that has a question. Let me just figure out how to unmute. All right, Cindy? Cindy, can you hear us?
While we're waiting we'll leave public comment open. Any board members have any other comments or questions? Okay. Do we have somebody on?
I just think, just sitting here thinking that we kind of should get out of phase one of the discussion and maybe enter into two. It sounds like we're trying to put this all, I think the case is, well, I don't know, if the applicant's done with his presentation and we need to move into.
Yeah, we have two other ones, and then F. Yeah. F is going to bring this back again.
Okay, bring it back so we can move ahead.
For us, yeah.
Okay.
No public comment?
No, okay.
All right, public comment.
Cindy, you're muted.
It's not, it's an.
There you go. Go ahead. Okay, we can hear you. Cindy, go ahead. Cindy, you're live in the meeting if you want to ask your question.
Can you hear anything?
Hold on, let me send her a message saying we can hear her. But, and then we'll do that.
I think we should move forward. She could raise her comments to the administrator, and we'll address it later. Mr. Ravicchio, Mr. Heinold, thank you. Mr. Zabo, thank you for, okay. We're going to move forward to, there's no action to be taken by the Joint Land Use Board on this. It's just an informal review. Next is case D, Haynes Port Partners, another informal review. Who is representing?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on that. This is addressed to our planners, Scott, Mr. Taylor. Do we have to make a recommendation back to the township as a result of this hearing?
That's going to come under case F.
All right, you're going to hold it later on.
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah, okay.
Two more,
All
sorry.
right, so we're talking about it now, but.
Yeah, yes. It was, the purpose of them coming in here for an informal review was to respond to the questions that were raised at the last meeting and at the Economic Development Committee.
I understand.
Right?
You want me to?
No, we're going to get there under F.
Is he even here?
Huh?
I don't think they're here.
Who's Haynes Port Partners?
Oh, they're not here.
Oh, that was going to be David Frank and Harry Mushleg? Okay.
They're not online, I think. They're not good. Oh.
Last call. Anybody here in the room representing them?
I can, want me to report?
I don't know what they have to do. Sound like a dog barking.
Yeah.
I can report it to work. What the hell?
Well, let's hold Hainsport Partners in abeyance for a second. We'll move to the next case, 20-02, BT.
Mr. Chair, please.
Yes.
We have a member who may want to add something to the Hainsport Partners, Section D.
All
Yeah,
right.
these legal entities are confusion. Is this Mosch Legal?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Speak on it?
Yeah.
Okay, so for the benefit of the board members, as you know, and some people attended a meeting, and I'm going to call it the Mosch Legal Tract, was pretty cut and dry. A, they don't have a customer. B, they had a conceptual drawing of 4 buildings. The entrance to the site on 38 seemed vague to me. What was apparent was an exit onto Hainsport Mount Laurel Road, which would be up to the county to decide if that is feasible or not. But it was pretty cut and dry. Again, no customers that he represented. He had no. Again, I call them customers or clients for the property. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Can I speak on that other little road you're talking about?
Ask H. He's the chair.
Sorry?
There's a little road that you're talking about, and
The little road?
yeah, he said there's 2 roads, one off of 38 and one on the Mount Laurel Road from that building. Can I explain that?
Sure.
Years ago, it was Bachman Volkswagen, and they would fix something and then test it. And instead of going out the front on 38, Bachman owned all that property, and they just simply went over the grass. It did become worn down, and it does say road closed. It was never really a road. Bachman just used it to get off the property. He'd go around the block, down Fostertown, back to 38 to test all the cars. That was, I've been there 49 years, and that's my assessment of that. If the township can find anything that it was a legal road or a paper street, but I do not think you'll find that.
Okay.
So I wouldn't consider it really an exit at that area.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Disco.
To address your concerns, one of the things that we went over with developers...
I can't hear anything you're saying.
Can you hear me now? One of the things we went over with the developers is that we are firmly against any commercial going on to Hainsport Mount Laurel Road.
Okay. It was just said. That's why I wanted to respond to it. It was never really a road unless somebody can prove me different from the township.
Okay.
I had a paper street on mine, and Bachman gave half to me and half to my neighbor, so I know what that was. But to my knowledge, this was never a street. It was just something, back in the old days, you did what you wanted. And that's what Bud used to do with the cars.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving forward, since there's no one here from Hainsport Partners, we'll move on to case 20-02 BTC Roman numeral 3 Acquisition LLC, another discussion. Who's from?
We have no one here from there.
Who are they?
That can be removed from the agenda as well.
Pardon me?
There's nobody here for that. That was,
Okay. That was the one you asked me about the other night. They were, okay. They lose. Okay, F, preliminary investigation. Now, we're going back to this whole discussion we've had before, only from another standpoint. This is the action that is being asked by the Township Committee from the Joint Land Use Board to investigate, which we have done, and make a recommendation relative to non-condemnation redevelopment rehabilitation of this entire project, which, for anything better, would be everything represented on this map. Okay? So, Mr. Taylor, would it be appropriate to shift the burden to you since you carried the ball
I would be happy to, Mr. Chairman, board members, thank you. We did hand out 2 additional items this evening. The first one is a table that shows the steps, and we spoke a little bit about these at the last meeting. We're currently on step number 3, which is the public hearing regarding the designation of those areas. As you indicated, Mr. Chairman, the Township Committee on November 12, 2019, asked the Joint Land Use Board to investigate whether or not these 17 parcels totaling approximately 42 acres met the statutory criteria to be considered either A, non-condemnation redevelopment area,
Committee did it.
or B, a rehabilitation area. We submitted the required study area map that was on file with the township. We also included a lengthy report dated June 29, 2020. We reviewed that at the July 2020 hearing. The board raised several questions. As the mayor indicated, that followed up with the informal meeting of the Economic Development Committee with the 2 largest property owners within the study area, Mr. Rivicchio Long Ridge Farms, as well as the Muehlschlegel and their related corporate entities. So I can answer any questions about the individual parcel analysis, and if I could ask Deputy Mayor to perhaps take that board off of the easel so we can see the one that's directly under it. So the final step within this process, and again, looking at the table, this is the designation study, everything shown in light blue. On the table, the next phase would be the redevelopment plan, where things like stormwater and buffers and setbacks and trees and making sure lighting has minimal impact and all those design features. That happens under that green redevelopment plan phase. So as it stands this evening, the board has an opportunity to be able to comment and refer back their recommendations to Township Committee regarding the study area. And I'll refer to the exhibit that I've also handed out a copy of page 32 from our report for any board members that didn't bring their full copy with them. All of those yellow properties, parcels A, B, C, I, H, O, and P, that are shown in yellow, they meet the statutory criteria to be considered a non-condemnation area, redevelopment area. We recommend that they be designated as such. Parcels Q and parcels J, which are owned by Rivicchio and Muehlschlegel, respectively, they do not meet the statutory criteria to be considered an area in need of redevelopment. However, the statute allows parcels to be included that may not in and of themselves meet the criteria, but for which the town feels that they are necessary to be included for the effective overall redevelopment of the area. So it was our recommendation that parcels Q and parcels J, because they're owned by entities that own yellow properties, that they be included in the redevelopment area designation. That's sort of major topic number 1. The second topic is the disposition of the pink properties.
Could I just ask one clarification question on what you just said? Even if the Joint Land Use Board were to approve this, recommend it back to the Township Committee, properties Q and D will still remain residential from a zoning standpoint, and J would be highway commercial because it is now. We're not changing any zoning.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Any action this evening simply qualifies this as a redevelopment area. It doesn't change zoning, uses, any design standards.
Okay, thank you.
Before we jump onto the pink parcels, does anyone have any questions about the yellow and the green and the redevelopment designation?
As far as J, I thought we had determined at our last meeting that that was to be included in the yellow.
So it doesn't specifically meet the statutory criteria because, but I think there was a general consensus of the board that because of its location at that intersection, that it was necessary for the overall effective redevelopment of the area. So I think we didn't quite get to that step, but I think that there was at least general discussion and seemingly general consensus that parcel J should be included in the redevelopment area. We're suggesting that parcel Q also be included in the redevelopment area because that would be able to facilitate the rezoning to allow the residential component that was discussed during the informal this evening that had single families along Eastport Mount Laurel Road with the townhomes behind to reduce the size of the property within the highway commercial, the HC zoning district. So because they were in common ownership between those two entities, the Radicchio properties on the left or west side of the study area, and then the Mulchlegel, that all of those parcels be included in the non-condemnation redevelopment area designation.
So you're saying that parcel Q is zoned residential at this time, is that correct?
It is, and with your designation this evening, it remains zoned residential. It wouldn't be until we get to steps 6, 7, and 8 where any changes to zoning would even be considered.
Is parcel J at present zoned commercial?
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Taylor, a question on the wording of the township resolution. It's 219-16111. And on page 3 of the resolution, but 35 of your book. You with me? Or let me know when you are with me.
So on page 35 of our report is the prior resolution? Yes.
Right, and the first whereas paragraph?
Yes.
Where it asks this board to recommend to the township whether the township should designate all or part of the study area, and that's what we're talking about on the diagrams, as an area in need of redevelopment without condemnation or an area in need of rehabilitation. From your point of view, and I would ask the same question of our solicitor, do we need to make that distinction, or do we simply recommend to the town that they deal with this consolidated parcel for purposes of our analysis as one or the other? In other words, the town makes the ultimate decision as to whether to use the rehabilitation in lieu of without condemnation or the rehabilitation portion of the statute.
So, and I'll let Mr. Kingsbury follow up after that. The way the local redevelopment and housing law is structured, much in the same way that the balance of powers in the municipal land use law says, joint land use board, you're allowed to do the master plan, but township committee, you do the ordinances. A very similar balance is set up in the redevelopment process. That's why the joint land use board is charged with reviewing these properties against those statutory criteria, and it's the board's authority to make that recommendation to say, yes, we believe that these properties meet the statutory criteria to be considered an area in need of redevelopment without condemnation, and we recommend that the governing body designate them so.
All right, well, there's a big or in the paragraph, so do we have to pick one or the other, or can we simply recommend to committee that they treat the parcel in question under one or the other.
I read that to mean that the township governing body would choose one of those options.
Well, that's the way I read it, but I'm just asking, because it's a little, you could make an argument that this board has to make that choice, but I don't think the statute intended us to make that choice. I think it just intended us to recommend to the township committee to deal with that. But what's your view on it?
My view?
Can I speak to that?
Mr. Chairman, can we hear from?
Yeah, please.
Maybe two attorneys will agree, we'll see about, right?
Yeah. Could you just raise the microphone and speak
Yeah.
into it, please?
Doug Heinold again.
And you can take your mask off so you can hear better.
The way that I've always participated in redevelopment and rehabilitation is that the recommendation that comes back from the board that goes to the governing body is, here's the criteria, does it meet it or does it not meet it? And it's not an either or. So it's very frequent actually that if something meets redevelopment, it's also going to meet the rehabilitation standard. So my request would be that you make that recommendation that we meet the redevelopment criteria for our properties. And likewise, if you're comfortable with the designation that's been recommended by your planner, that they also qualify as rehabilitation. Then when it goes up to the governing body, they can decide what they actually want to implement for the site, which is more of a policy decision. But this is a planning determination based on hard criteria.
And in this particular case, there's evidence on the record that would allow it to qualify under either.
Right, that was my interpretation, and I wrote the resolution to convey that.
Can I get my further reading on this? When you go on to the next page, the way you've written it is that the ultimate recommendation that this board would make is to recommend that they be redevelopment. Those parcels be redevelopment. In addition to the two other parcels that don't qualify, but should still be recommended for redevelopment. And then the third recommendation is for which we haven't gotten to, the pink properties. So I think you've taken it to the point where you've taken that out of the redevelopment or rehab. You've basically said that we're going to recommend redevelopment. That's the way I read it, but maybe I'm wrong.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, the whole process is kind of a misnomer because most of the Revicchio tract is empty land. So we're going through a process to say it's in need of redevelopment. Yes, it is for him to attract a commercial customer and be competitive with other sites in surrounding areas as far as any sort of incentives. The real gorilla in the room is the Mulchlegel place. That needs redevelopment. But again, in today's competitive marketplace, these clients and potential businesses, all want to make a deal. They all want to get something to ease their pain of developing the site. So that's pretty much, what I think, and I hope I can explain what I believe the process is to the rest of the committee. The rest of the planning board, excuse me. And I have a question for you. Am I supposed to make a recommendation to myself as a committee member that this is in need of redevelopment? Is that kind of strange?
You're not prohibited from voting on that.
So I'm allowed to do that? Okay, I just want to make sure.
There's a statutory provision that says you can't.
Okay.
So if I could have the board members take a look at the resolution that was handed out, that we're being asked to pass. We're looking at, and Mr. Kingsbury, correct me on this if I'm in error, we're kind of looking at three parts of this.
Correct.
The on this map that we had in the booklet, and we also have a copy of it tonight, we're looking at all of the yellow properties in the first part that are areas in need of redevelopment without condemnation. It's parcels A, B, C, D, H, I, O, and P. Correct. That's the first part.
This follows Mr. Taylor's recommendations.
Right. And the next, which also follows Mr. Taylor's recommendation, has to do with the parcels we were just talking about, Q, which is Mr. Ravicchio's residence, and J, parcel J, which is the green part at the tip of the property here, which is owned by Muschleifer.
Correct.
And the third part of this resolution addresses the residential properties on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. And Mr. Taylor, you were about to address it, also known as the pink properties, right?
Yes.
Okay, and your recommendation was that they do not meet the criteria for non-condemnation, redevelopment, or rehabilitation, and they could also be left undesignated and remain the current zoning status.
Well, just to clarify, and I'll talk a bit again about my July 9th, 2020, and the contents of the report. Because 5 of the 6 residential properties that are located within the subject study area, or 83% of the housing stock, is greater than 50 years old. All of those properties, and that's one of the rehabilitation criteria. So those pink properties do qualify, but they're all in good condition and well-maintained, so they do not need redevelopment. But because of the age of the structures, they could qualify, and arguably do qualify as rehabilitation area designation. We also offered a third option, that if the board believes that or recommends that they be left undesignated, they could be left within their underlying zoning.
Could that be changed at a later date?
So any of this can be changed, and it's not uncommon for it to happen. When anything does have to be changed, those changes have to go back through steps and start over at 1. If for some reason there was an additional small parcel that the governing body wanted to include, they'd have to add that 1 block and lot and start over at number 1, and we'd have to go through this whole process again.
Well, I think what my question is, if we were, tonight, if we were to recommend back to the Township Committee, everything that is on this resolution, with the exception of the last page, page 3, where we address the pink properties, to bring that back later, they'd have to start all over? They can't just start at this point? It's the residential properties I'm talking about.
So you need to redesignate the pink property.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of, on page 2, it's at the bottom, or left undesignated to remain in their current zoning status.
Right. So I think we would have to reconvene, and this is something that I think between Mr. Gillespie and Mr. Kingsbury would have to figure out. If at any point in the future, if they were left undesignated now, and it was determined that it made sense to include them in the rehab area, could we start and come directly back to step 3 and just reconvene an additional public hearing on this matter? The redevelopment statute is probably 40 to 60 pages, and there's a significant amount of noticing required. That's not a call I'd want to make, A, as a planner, or B,
Yeah.
Can you, Scott, just re-explain, if you will, what the advantages, because this is a little bit of a surprise to some of us, because we hadn't seen it, so we want a clarification on it. Could you explain to the board what you feel the benefits would be to these property owners for them to be included in this
in a
Application, yes.
rehab designation. So the benefit, and again, when we analyzed those properties, we noted for every single one of them that they are not.
Mrs. Betcher, could you hear Mr. Taylor?
Barely, but I can, yes.
Okay, because she's the only property owner that's spoken.
Show up,
to this,
yeah.
so I'd like to have her know what's going on.
Is that better? Yes. And do my Wayne Newton impersonation.
All right.
The benefits so for starters, we noted that those residential properties are not blighted. They do not meet the statutory criteria to be considered redevelopment. Because of the age of the structures, because a majority of those homes average 50 years or older, they could be considered rehabilitation area. The benefits of a rehabilitation area designation is that the township committee can offer up to a 5-year tax abatement on any improvements to the property. So if someone were to sell their home or decided they wanted to double the size of their home, their tax bill would not double the next year. There is a staggered rate of increase over 5 years under a rehabilitation area designation. So it can incentivize people to invest in their home, because knowing that they're not going to have to spend an extra $20,000 in taxes over the next 5 years, that money can then be put into improving their property. And it usually happens in areas where where you're not seeing a lot of reinvestment in those areas. If any of those properties are not improved over the next 5 years, the town will see zero tax increase. If they are improved under rehabilitation, the underlying tax stays the same and there is a phasing in of that tax increase. The benefit of the homeowner is they save some taxes and they got to invest that money into their property. The benefit to the community is the area has rehabilitated, and at the end of 5 years, there is full taxation on the value of those improvements. So in a way, it's a kind of a win-win, because property values have now gone up. We see rehabilitation in that area, and there's no reduction. There's just a staggered in of the increase in taxes. I may have mentioned at the July 9 meeting, the entire downtown of Medford, the historic village and all those historic homes, were designated as a rehabilitation area in 2014 to try to offer some incentives for those homeowners to be able to invest in their properties, and the businesses, frankly, to be able to defer some of that tax increase over a 5-year period. That was actually one of the results of that, was the Pop Shop coming in and taking over the bank at Main and Union that had been vacant for probably at least a decade. So those are the advantages. There can be tax incentives for people who do want to either sell their property to somebody that wants to rebuild or expand their property, or if they want to do those improvements themselves.
Just out of curiosity, is there some definition of what constitutes rehab? And if I want to update my kitchen, is that rehab? Or are we talking about sort of a significant, like adding a second floor or a complete? I'm just wondering if there's some.
So that's a question for attorneys and assessors, but if it's not something that would materially change the assessment, then it wouldn't change the taxation.
So, bottom line, I'm speaking on behalf of these 5 residents that are living there, including Mrs. Betcher. Let's say we approve this where the pink houses, the pink areas, are included in the area of redevelopment rehabilitation. If the homeowners do absolutely nothing, nothing changes with them. They don't get any benefit, but they don't get any detriment.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay. And if we likewise approve this and cut them out and say, leave them alone, they still won't have any benefit and they won't have any detriment. They just stay exactly as they are.
Correct.
So the net result is that if we include them in the redevelopment area, they could potentially have a benefit if they upgraded their home, their residence, or if they sold it, it could be an attractive sale point to another purchaser.
Correct. In the rehabilitation.
If it was rehabilitation.
But let's throw it out there that things change and these properties are now desired by the yellow, if I'm going to call it. If we didn't designate them, that basically eliminates them from any, so to speak, town-sponsored economic redevelopment. And again, I'm not saying that anybody wants to buy them or anybody wants to sell them, but that kind of cuts those pink properties out if we don't include them.
If we don't include them now, then there's no chance they can be included. What we would expect would happen, and we did the same thing with the Lawrence Boulevard redevelopment area. When we get to the redevelopment plan and we do step 5 and 6, those pink properties are going to simply remain within the R1 zoning district. I would imagine that the governing body and the planning board, joint land use board, would not intend to rezone them. So when any potential redevelopment plan moves forward, I just assumed that only those yellow and green parcels would be contemplated for any rezoning. And at that point in time, if they stay as R1, they can't be included within any redevelopment of the yellow.
You're saying that Q is now, could become in a redevelopment yellow zone
Correct.
if we include that. But if we don't include it, it remains residential.
No. So,
Could you repeat the question, because I didn't hear it, and I'm pretty close.
you want to restate it, Tish?
No, you can restate it.
Her question was, if we don't include Q now, does it stay as residential? So, there's a very short answer to that, and there's a very long answer. The long answer is actually the more accurate answer.
That's his freaking parcel.
Both of those parcels, the green parcels, do qualify as a rehab area. As we spoke about before, out of all of the 17 parcels, when we looked at the housing stock, when we
Battery died.
So the battery's red. So when we looked at the housing stock, can you hear me, Mr. Fetcher? Thank you. When we looked at the housing stock, which is one of the rehab criteria, 5 of the 6 homes, or 83% of the homes, meet the statutory criteria. So by virtue of that, the entire 17 parcels, the whole area, that whole giant triangle, qualifies as rehabilitation. The yellow properties are the properties that actually have meet that higher threshold. They meet the statutory criteria for redevelopment. So in our analysis, because the 2 green properties were in common ownership with yellow properties, it was a more logical connection for them to be included as necessary for the overall effective redevelopment area, which is allowed under the local redevelopment and housing law under the definition of a redevelopment area. So that's why there are a number of options that the board has for this. When we talked about rehabilitation, we talked about that 5-year tax abatement, and when there's a short-term tax abatement law. A redevelopment area is actually allowed to offer up to a 30-year tax exemption and abatement under the statute. And that's where the mayor was talking about for commercial development to try to compete with a lot of the surrounding communities.
municipalities are offering more than 5. Sometimes it's 10 years, sometimes it's 20. Again, on just those commercial properties. I don't think I've ever seen any tax exemption on just residential unless...
No. Thank you. Great. Unless it was a 100% affordable housing project. But, you know, as Mr. Heinold indicated, and as I don't want to speak for the Township Committee, I wouldn't recommend or suggest that any of the residential be considered for tax exemption and abatement under this scenario.
Can I just say one thing? When you say triangle, are you including these properties? When you say triangle?
We are not. I was just referring to the colored study area for the overall.
Triangle, that's
So- I apologize.
It's a triangle, because at one point, somebody wanted to buy all that years ago, all those houses.
Yeah, so I apologize. I should have been clear. Just the colored triangle on that plan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Yes, ma'am. I was going to get there, but...
So just a brief comment from a zoning official's point of view, as I listen to everyone in this room, including you folks, the residents, is that one of the things that I hear from these board members is that you don't want this piecemeal. You don't want this coming in, pardon the expression, half-assed, and I'm going to say it like it is. With that being said, is that in consideration, from my point of view, as the zoning enforcement head, is that if you're taking the portions that are under the rehabilitation, those green portions, am I right, Mr. Taylor? And then the yellow under the rehab, since they are all owned by certain entities together though, is that, wouldn't it make sense then, in order not to piecemeal it, is to make one decision under a redevelopment? Just the fact, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the rehab requirements and designations are different than the redevelopment. Would that be correct?
Correct.
So with that said, if the town would like to see this portion of our land, which after 18 years, I know that this is a special piece of property to the township, I know that. Wouldn't you think then to consider making it all under the redevelopment so that it meets all the same criteria, so that when they are projecting it to a developer or housing, whatever the case may be, is that it's one clearly defined development? So that's just my thought as the zoning officer, as I sit and listen to you folks have your, concerns about this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Newcomb. Any other comments? Now, the resolution that Mr. Kingsbury has drafted up for us does exactly what you're talking about. It treats all the yellow properties as redevelopment, Q and P as redevelopment, and we're just left with the pink residential properties, and we can include it or we can just leave it alone.
I'm ready.
Okay. Anybody care to make a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
What's that?
I think we're closed, aren't we?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
My question is, I'm a homeowner that is directly impacted by the decision covering the green parcel.
Or not?
Yeah?
I've yet to see this report. I happened to find out about this meeting tonight by happenstance from my neighbor. And this significantly impacts my life and my property value. And I'm not even given a chance to review the report. You're going to make a decision.
I thought you were up here talking before.
I was asking questions about the development project. I had no idea that the board was about to make a decision as to whether or not to include the parcel identified as Q on this paper, to change its area to include in the redevelopment.
Okay, hold on just a second. Wasn't that published in the paper, public tonight?
Yes, and it was published for last month as well.
All the notices were done.
It's been 2 months in a row that we've...
It was continuation.
Yeah, and it was continued. Yeah. So, sir, we don't like to just get arbitrary with it, okay? If you would like to come up and make a comment under public comment, I'll reopen it and you can, welcome to say something. Okay? We're here to help the residents.
I appreciate that. So, I'm just, so this is more for questions because as it sounds, there's some other confusion about these terminology differences. So how is the definition of the redevelopment area for the parcel for Q, Mr. Taylor? How is that specific to the overall development of the project important to be included?
So when we talked about, and I'll refer to some of the discussions during the informal meeting, part of the concept is that there could be a potential for the commercial area to be reduced of the yellow property A, and for the residential component that fronts out on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road to extend closer toward Route 38. Because those are in common ownership and because of the configuration of the wetlands, there's some rationale to having all of those parcels owned by one entity treated in the same way. The zoning will be different. And the zoning, again, the governing body would agree, Q would remain in a residential zone, but so would part of parcel A. And what that would allow us to do is develop those design standards, like full cutoff, low glare lighting, and buffering standards, architecture standards, so that A and Q and B get developed comprehensively based on a plan that's set forth. And that's one of the things, as we talked about before, we're at step 3 now. That plan, where we talk about any changes, doesn't happen until steps 5, 6, 7, and 8. So that's really the subject of the next step. This first step is just saying, does it meet the criteria so we can take that next step to look at a redevelopment plan.
Okay, so is it fair to say then that without the board including identifier Q in the proposal, you would not be able to present your recommendation to the planning and zoning board specifically to ask for rezoning of that lot into multi-unit?
So we can, because the local redevelopment and housing law actually allows a redevelopment plan to be developed for a rehabilitation area designation or redevelopment. So the only difference between the two, the board felt strongly that green should adjust its rehab designation. That's also an option. And we talked about that under our parcel analysis. A redevelopment plan can still be developed to effectuate those design standards and potential zoning changes.
Okay, so then it's actually not important, from what you just said, that the board designates parcel Q to be included in the redevelopment area.
I didn't say, I don't think I said it's not important. My comment was...
I'm sorry, let me rephrase, it's not required.
The comment was, because all of those lands are in common ownership, we believe that it made more sense that for effective redevelopment of the area, because of county approvals, because of necessary rezoning, if all of those parcels are considered as redevelopment area designation. That doesn't change what the zoning may or may not become under steps 5 through 9. It simply allows us to treat all of these properties in a similar way as we move forward under a redevelopment. But the board could, both parcels Q and J could stay as rehabilitation, and they can still then be incorporated into a redevelopment plan.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, I need a little help on the, after all this, on the recommendation. I am going to make a motion that we do an and/or as far as rehabilitation and I forgot the other word.
Redevelopment.
Redevelopment, there you go. So I'm going to leave that, I'd like to, my motion to leave that in there, the reasoning being, the green, the Q, would not necessarily be able to take advantage of a 30-year pilot, because again, we're talking about residential on that site, and I don't think, I just hope that the applicant doesn't come in looking for a pilot on that, because I've never seen us do that in town, but you never know. But it would be short-lived, so the committee would make that decision as far as the and/or redevelopment or rehabilitation. I'm going to reverse myself on the pink. I didn't like it when it first came in. It was a real surprise and a little bit of a shocker, since those are existing residents, but I think Scott really did a great job explaining it, and there's really nothing bad that can come out of deeming that area in need of rehabilitation. So I'm going to include all the map in my motion.
Right, I have a question on that motion.
Just, can we hold off the question till we have a second? Okay, I'll second the motion. Any questions on the motion?
There is.
Yes. I think somebody, you had a question?
Tish had a question, I have a question.
Tish? Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Kelly.
My fear on the pink parcel and even a little bit on parcel Q is that you can have one of these developers, whoever comes forward to develop, put pressure on those properties. Or if someone has to sell, they're going to sell for whatever reason, they have to move, are they going to be pressured to sell to a yellow? Or is that going to remain residential, the pink parcels?
So steps 5 through 9.
Steps 5 through 9 dictate that the township committee decides what the zoning of those will remain. And if they stay as R1, and it sounds to me that there's no real, from reviewing the informal plans, neither of the proposed highway commercial developments contemplate or include any of those parcels in their development. So if they remain as R1 zoning, then there would be no benefit for the yellow to put any pressure. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but there would be no advantage for the yellow to try to expand into the pink, because they're just buying a single-family house that's an existing home in an existing single-family residential zone.
I think.
So looking at the map one more time, the pink parcel, parcel D, parcel Q, and a little bit of parcel A are contemplating being zoned residential R1?
No.
A portion of A,
Are you paying attention?
and again, we're jumping ahead to redevelopment
All
plan.
right, so we don't have to jump ahead.
But-
So what was the purpose of this meeting? The purpose of this meeting was just to set the boundaries, correct?
Correct.
All right. Then if you were setting the boundaries, you're just setting, you're not setting zoning, you're just setting boundaries.
Correct. Just to meet the statutory step requirement of the local redevelopment and housing law. Your action tonight does not change any of the zoning on any of these properties. That would be steps, again, 5 through 9, as part of that redevelopment plan process that the governing body will move forward. That again, also has to get referred back to the Joint Land Use Board for review and master plan consistency determination.
Can I just add a clarification? I think you're saying, if we were looking at this map, okay? As of right now, properties Q, D, O, and P are all zoned residential and will remain residential no matter what we do here tonight.
We're not rezoning anything.
Huh?
We're not rezoning anything.
No, I know we're not. I just want everybody to understand, and actually, the other thing that I was going to add was part of parcel A, which is highway commercial, the applicant anticipates down the road having it changed to residential. So we're going to get more residential in the area, not less.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
So parcels Q all the way through N. I'm sorry, actually all the way through P.
Yeah, right, all along Mainsport, Mount Laurel.
Q, D, E, F, G, K, L, M, N, O, P are all zoned residential. And regardless of your action tonight and Township Committee's action on the designation, they stay zoned residential.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that. Any other questions on the motion?
So the question on the motion is, Bruce, your motion is to adopt the draft resolution as written with no changes.
Yes. Unless there's an objection from the board member that makes sense, I may re-enter a motion, an amended motion.
Well, I have to say, I think it agrees with the front part, but item 2 says the recommendation doesn't say area in need of redevelopment or rehab, it just says area in need of redevelopment. But you're recommending that it be an either or.
Well, we would offer the or to the township committee.
So that has to change in this resolution.
Okay, well, we can amend the resolution to state that, and/or, which is what I originally
And then on...
tried to
For the
communicate.
pink properties, this says that we're going to recommend it being undesignated, but your recommendation is that we designate it in need of rehab.
Yeah, I see no downside to doing that at this point. I didn't see it last meeting, but I see no downside to do that at this point.
So what we're talking about is amending the resolution draft to incorporate redevelopment or rehabilitation.
To recommend to the township committee, that's what we're doing here, if I
Recommend to the
understand it.
township committee.
Yes, and/or.
Okay, so it'll be redevelopment and/or rehabilitation, non-condemnation, correct?
Right. Yes, sir.
Okay? So I seconded the motion. I will agree with the modification on the motion. Any other questions on the motion? Have a roll call, please.
Mayor McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Professor.
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly.
No.
Mr. McKay.
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio.
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall.
Yes.
Mrs. Costo.
Yes.
And Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
There you
Motion
go.
carries. Okay.
You're good.
Thank you all.
You're good, you're good, you're good. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break, also known as bladder break.
How come you voted no?
Doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. How the fuck am I on this agenda here? Minutes. We made it.
Me too. Okay, that's what we're up here.
I gotta go. I gotta go. We almost done.
Mr. Meredith, can you unmute and say something? For those of you who are online, can you hear us? I've unmuted everybody, so if somebody can unmute themselves and say something?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Awesome. All right, we're taking a quick break, so I just want to make sure we're all connected in case you have public comments.
This thing came up once before. Thank you.
Thanks.
How you doing? Question. Here. Can we do anything about that big fence opening next to the Nissan town road from the distance?
So the only access to that.
Hi, this is Mark. I'm unmuted. How do I do that?
Okay.
Notice they cleaned it up.
All right, thanks, Mark. We're taking a couple-minute break, okay?
So they did that.
Cool. Good.
Property.
All right.
The way,
I'm
yeah.
gonna give you a warning.
Yeah, well,
Cleaned it up about, now it's going to violate. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I haven't been by it for days, but I noticed it didn't clean up, but then you're
Well,
telling me
here's the issue that the fake.
but they have storage out there.
We're having, in the construction world, we're having crisis, literally. For example, there is no more vinyl right now. There is no more, there's very little aluminum. The wood is becoming scarce. My contractors can't get pressure treated wood. Anything that's in the post.
Yeah,
So what
I
they
mean-
did is speaking with them, and I understand this. Lawyers are getting So what they did was they stockpiled. We're doing something so that they don't run out. But I said to them, you're not only the problem with your site plan, I brought George Myers and the fire official, fire safety officer. So what they wound up doing was unloading it on the job scope. Then they would be more water. The unfortunate part is it's the height of the season. Because normally from about October to about February, it's clean. Only because they don't have any problems. I said to them, you can't keep this car by out in front of the stuff. If it's thrown out of your sight.
It's trash.
Then you need to move on somewhere else. So they got their warning, they have to move up. I'm slowly seeing them progressing. At this point, the problem I have with anyone that
I mean, I'm not saying from us.
Maybe that's another problem, but they ought to be, as long as they're being ticketed, or warned and then ticketed.
So one of the things that the town administration has done. I'm going to use that one.
Well, they want the warning for many years.
So that's what most of them,
Yeah.
knock on wood somewhere.
That's
The government didn't even know they were.
I've been so lucky is that when they know Congress makes a phone call, you're on a different board. And by the time after that phone call, it doesn't work. And that includes the residents as well, is that now you're going to the biggest problem I have now is that I used to get 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Can't go by. Now we have like, Greeley has an hour report right now for code enforcement. Everyone shows up on work. So that's what our dilemma is in regards to, not that there's not a paper trail going.
I know, you know more about that.
First of all, the court system is not even like here in zoning issues. Absolutely. That's why so many times they pass this stuff back to you guys. So with that said, it is definitely, it has been February right now, about the past year and a half. We feel that. So,
Well, you're doing what you can do.
well, you guys, I understand how businesses work with production. I said, but at the end of the night, we can't leave this crap out there. This is unacceptable. I said,
And when Tish,
this out there. You were thinking that the son, that was the point of this building. It was for you to keep.
yeah, well, that's why I get in close and say, hey,
production of the day. Come on, we got good.
All right.
Everybody knows production. Let's finish this up. And then at the end of the night, except for that. So believe me.
Ready?
They're well
Sorry.
correct. But I appreciate you paying attention to
Okay, let's go back to the meeting, so we can all get out of here.
Give me
Excuse me.
1 second.
Okay, the next order of business is approving the minutes of the special meeting of June 22nd.
I'll make a motion that we approve those minutes.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion?
We don't have,
Hearing no questions, I will ask for a roll call, please.
First was
Bruce?
Bruce.
Chair McLaughlin,
Yes. Oh, we voting?
Yeah.
Yes, we are voting.
Baggio,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Left.
Mrs. Tyndall. Yes. Ms. Costco.
Or what are we voting on? Oh, yes, thank you.
Mr. Sell.
Yes.
And Mr. Colfer.
Yes. We have two resolutions. One is the resolution we were just talking about, and Mr. Kingsbury is going to change that to put the rehabilitation or redevelopment in. We'll
I want to make sure what you want to change. Bottom page 2.
Not the bottom.
Tom, help us out.
Up at the top, number 2, and then underneath it says, "Area in need of redevelopment without condemnation." It'll be rehabilitation or redevelopment.
And/or, right.
Yeah, and/or. That's how the motion was approved. A through P.
All the parcels, right?
Okay? Then the next one is Q and J, same thing.
Or rehab.
And/or redevelopment, rehabilitation without condemnation. And then the so-called pink properties, that can be left alone because we gave them the either/or in there. Correct?
So all of them are and/or.
So, if we have to vote on it again, we did it already,
Already
right?
did it.
Okay.
We're good? Okay. Next is
Arnett.
Resolution 2020-10, the, oh, that's the Demantis property resolution. And we need a motion and a second on that.
Well, I'll offer 2020-10 and move for its adoption.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions on the motion?
Yes. Did we include low and moderate income housing in that resolution, or does that come in under final? That'll be in final, all right.
Okay, any other questions? May I have a roll call, please?
Chair McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall. Yes. Ms. Costco.
Yes.
Mr. Sell.
Yes.
Mr. Colfer.
Yes. We have correspondence. You have an
I make a
amended list of correspondence with 4 items. Need
I make a motion that we
second to have
accept
it
the
included.
correspondence and file it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly.
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall.
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Ms. Costco,
Yes.
Mr. Silk,
Yes.
and Mr. Colfer.
Yes. Professional comments? No comment?
No, sir.
No, sir. Mrs. Nichol?
Using that special word "have."
That's all right.
That's all right.
Well, the next time...
Don't worry about it.
Next time,
I wouldn't have understood what you meant if you didn't say that. So I appreciate it.
I like to be direct, and you all know.
you just meant to say it wasn't fast, it was the other part. Okay, board comments. Any board members have a comment? I have one. It's in the form of a apology to Mr. Kingsbury. At the last meeting, we got into a discussion, tabling, so forth, and I made a comment that it could just be done, and you said that it had to be, we had to vote on it, and I looked at Robert's Rules of Order, I misread it, and you were right. That's why we pay you the big bucks. So I'm sorry I opened my mouth at the last. Okay.
The board doesn't really go by the Robert's Rules of Order unless they formally adopt it. And I went back and looked at the rules just to see. I thought I was right.
Yeah, you were. Okay.
We were right.
Any other board comments? No?
Scott, I appreciate the presentation that you made. It's one of the best ones we've seen here. It was a few curveballs for some of us new members. Hopefully by us including the planning board chairman on a future economic development committee will certainly ease those concerns of a surprise. So maybe we change the procedure in town for future development, but it's great that everybody's on the same page.
I want to second that. You did a really good job. And the procedure maybe should be a little bit different, but that's for the future. But you did an excellent job.
Yeah, the visuals are just unbelievably terrific.
Yeah,
They're great.
It was really good.
We added that three-color map at the tail end of the whole thing because it, I was trying to highlight it in my own head to do it, and it would have been,
Yeah, I mean,
It was great.
it's so easy, the yellow, the pink, we're talking about the
Yeah.
green, good job.
Okay, public comments. Any public comments on anything that took place tonight or any other public comments? Mrs. Mackin.
I would just like to thank Mr. Taylor, too. This is probably the nicest presentation I've ever seen. So, thank you for that. That's easier to understand, and I like all your, 1 to 10. Perfect. Thank you.
Mrs. Mackin, if you'd care to look at this is the booklet that was
Oh, I'd
made
love
by
to see
Mr.
that.
Taylor the last time. It's even more detailed.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So, okay.
Paula, when I leave, can you open that second door?
Whatever.
Don't let it,
I'll pull the
listen.
red carpet out for you as well, don't worry.
Good,
I'm
good.
going to basket it now until next month. I'm sure I'll-
Hey, good's good. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Any other public comments? If hearing none?
Well, let's give our online hi. Okay, Mr. Murdy? Or?
Yeah, I'm just curious, we just voted on this to let them go through with it, correct?
Go to
No,
what?
no, we voted to recommend to the township committee that it further consider this area in need of redevelopment or, what's the other word again? Rehabilitation.
Without condemnation.
Without condemning any properties. So it's just step 3 and many more steps, Mark.
Okay, I must have missed something because I thought you just said resolution 2020-10 R&M. Did I miss that?
Yep. That's what we did, yes.
Oh, excuse me. 2020-10.
Oh, 10.
Has to do with the Menzies property.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
not the condemnation.
Okay, that was 9, sorry.
So is your question about 10 or 9? Which resolution?
2020-10, which
Okay.
was just put out a minute ago, that I heard.
It was,
That resolution,
We approved that when we were just at the end of the discussion.
yeah.
They
We-
voted on it.
Yeah, we did
That was
approve.
approved at the last meeting.
It
This
was
is the
approved at the
resolution
last meeting, then
document, Right?
Yeah, this was
Right.
It's memorializing.
It's memorializing what was
Already
approved
done.
last,
Yes,
at
it
the
was already
last
done.
meeting.
Was it the last meeting or?
No, it was
the
June
meeting before?
22nd.
June 22nd.
Was
Meeting,
R&M.
hearing.
It wasn't at the special meeting, it was
It was at the special meeting of June 22nd.
so,
R&M.
what I didn't,
And who was invited to the special meeting?
They got a wow.
It was open to
Yeah, excuse me.
advertised.
The special meeting
Left-hand
was
corner of that.
the Revicchio
He
property.
had it right on his plan.
June
proposed.
22nd.
I'm like, wait,
No.
The board's special meeting was on June
prohibited under
22nd.
We
And
didn't
that's
have
when Diamantis' application.
Oh,
was
okay, right.
his tenants, you know, he just.
Okay, and what was this gentleman's question?
Mr. Murdy
Yeah, it's
asked
going the
who
other
was
way.
invited to the special meeting.
This one would be going this way.
Oh, I must have missed that because I wasn't here, my bad. Just a heads up, when all of you were talking at the same time, it's incredibly difficult to listen to you not being there. So I kind of missed something, so this is going to come up in the next Amesport Township meeting, correct?
The township committee meeting?
When is,
What?
when is your redevelopment going to?
Designation.
Is he talking about the redevelopment or the?
No, he's talking about,
Revicchio will come up.
Mr. Murdy, are you talking about 2020-10?
Correct.
Okay, is that, and your question is that going to come up at the township committee meeting next?
Yes.
No,
We'll come back to this board.
right.
So it's a done deal then, is that what you're telling me?
They have to do final, right?
Yeah.
No, they have to come back to final.
That was preliminary
They
plans.
have to come back to the planning.
yeah, this was his approval of the preliminary. He has to come back with a final site plan for everything to this board, right?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Are there any other comments from the people on the go-to meeting? I've unmuted everybody.
Okay, adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We had a
Can I
motion.
get a first and a second?
Well, yes. We need a
We
second?
adjourn the meeting.
You never have a problem with that one.
Looking pretty good, right? How's it looking at the?
Will you second me?
You have me on as the signer.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask.
Why is that? Is that an error, or?
It's an error.
We
Okay.
adjourned. Are we officially adjourned?
Yeah, we're adjourned. We're done.
Um,
Yes, they have to redo both of these, I think. I mean, I don't have a problem with you signing it.
No, but I shouldn't be signing it if you're.
No.